Raymond Chandler said, "Throw up into your typewriter every morning and clean up every noon." In the wise words of Don Roth, I found the best way to revise your own work is to pretend someone else wrote it and then rip the living shit out of it.
I'm Lauren Oktovic.
And I'm Destiny Thompson.
And the prompt we were assigned in class was revision, influence, and craft. So basically what we had to do was look at the poems that we wrote in class and revise them. And based on this, we had to find the most important key parts of our poems that we revised and see how it affected our pieces and how it was good to revise them, even though it may be difficult to do based on trying to keep the integrity of the piece.
And we present to you the third time's the charm, or maybe the fourth.
So, the moral of the story, revision is key. When it comes to creating a poetic piece, a few elements of writing must be considered. When writing, the utilization of form and line are used in order to achieve organization and clarity, as well as to gain a better understanding and assist the overall flow of the poem and a lasting impression to the reader.
Here's my original poem, What I Might and Might Not Have Done. And it goes as follows. I might not tell you when I cried at the sound of your footsteps walking away from me, your stride on beat with the rock and roll music and the broken lyrics of that Aerosmith song you hate. I might not say when the last plane departs or that it will get canceled and you will probably stop speaking to me. I might have made the sun burst with my heated heart, overthinking when I might text you at 3 in the morning. I might have spoken my mind if you gave me the chance. You might believe that I don't fit into your delusional fantasy of what I should be, so I might have ignored your 10 calls on New Year's Eve. I might have neglected to tell you something special, but you might not have listened to me anyway. I might have wanted to be a better woman for you, love hard and worry less, but I failed to please you. I might have just crawled back into my comfort zone, worrying more and have it mean loving less or not loving at all. It might be easy for you to walk away from the scared woman standing before your very eyes. It might be over. My conscience reminds me what you might do today and where you might go in the future. It might not be a good idea because reality always finds a way to destroy a good thing. I might not ever know why you changed so much after your trip to Greece and the adventures you encountered. Who knew 3 months was all it took to do a complete 180 on me? So, to revise my poem, I focused a lot on structure, and according to the elements of poetry on lexiconic.net, structure has to do with the overall organization of lines and or the conventional patterns of sound. And we need structure. We need a nicely structured poem to help the reader understand the progression of the story within the poem to make it more clear for the reader. Bottom line is organization is essential when helping to, I don't want to say flow, but to make it more appealing to the reader. Since we have been working with free verse, figuring out the right way to organize a poem can be more difficult than when working with a traditional poem. In the words of Janet Burroway, if anything, verse must follow its own unique pattern. Verse that must follow its own unique pattern is more rigorous. Overall, the proper use of structure and organization creates a smoother flow in the overall poem. So to revise my poem based on structure, I thought about breaking it into stanzas, but I chose to keep it in that column form because it maintains that sense of rambling in the poem. I added lines that created small background details and to clear up confusion for the poem. I cut lines that weaken the story progression and or seemed unclear to the reader. I moved lines around and I fixed awkward lines and changed the title into something that was a little bit more appropriate. I also worked with poetic line in my poem. According to Janet Burroway, the line is a unit of verse ending in a typographical break. The type of line used in a poem teaches readers how to read a specific poem. And we have 3 types of lines: syntactically complete, which we learned from our lectures in class, is a break at predictable points in the poem. We also learned about end-stopped line in our lecture, which is a line ending at a grammatical boundary or break. And we also learned about annotated lines. In my revision, I focus more on annotated line, which is the lines that cut against syntax or grammatical units. And it also refers to lines with a built-in extra meaning. Use of this type of annotated line added a deeper meaning to the poem, and it did not make the poem blatantly obvious, but it is effective to the overall meaning of the poem. So here's my revised poem. The change in line organization is highlighted in pink, and the lines that I added are in gray. The annotated lines are in red. So you might believe that I don't fit into your delusional fantasy of what I should be. So you might have found someone else, a new and improved version of me. That is a little bit more details to the overall poem. Would you have gone to Greece if I had asked you to stay? I might not have told you when the last plane to Athens departs, or that it will get canceled, if that meant keeping you here with me. This is also an added line to add more details for it, and here's the annotated lines right there. I might have spoken my mind if you gave me the chance. I might not tell you when I cry at the sound of your footsteps walking away from me. Your stride on beat with the rock and roll music, or with the rock and roll, and the broken lyrics of that Aerosmith song you hate. I might have made the sun burst with my heated heart, overthinking what I might text you at 3 in the morning. I might have neglected to tell you something special, but you might not have listened to me anyway. I might have wanted to be a better woman for you, to love hard and worry less, but I failed to please you. I might have just crawled back into my comfort zone, letting anxiety kick in and have it mean worrying more. My conscience torments me about what you might do today and where you might go in the future. It might have been easy for you to walk away from the scared woman standing before your very eyes. It might be over.
And then next is my poem, The Face of Fear. This one is my original poem that I ended up revising. When I was a child, I believed that my toys were alive, each having a distinct face. I remember the devilish smile, piercing the silence, eyes, gazing deep within me, waiting for me to be ill-prepared. She consoled my fear of loneliness and instilled others, heights. I remember the sunset, pulling me into a trance. I remember the sunburn, stabbing with every moment, dry and cracking, like a branch. I dropped from the tree, snap. I fell through the air, my wings spreading wide. No warnings preceded, children do not fly. My ears tingled with pleasure as I heard the bright yellow tune fading into the blurring sky. Would you let the wind take you? So the first part that I edited in my poem was focusing on the poetic form. So based on Poetry Archive, they said, form in poetry can be understood as the physical structure of the poem. And I found this to be just a basic definition of what form can be, and just kind of generalizes everything. And so I looked further into Burroway and found a quote from her book. It says, poetry can take shapes that bear little or no resemblance to each other. Length has nothing to do at all with whether a thing may be called poetry. And so as you can see by looking at mine and Destiny's poems together, you can see they have very different forms even just by looking at them on a page. So this to me was very important in looking at my poem when I was looking at the structure of the overall piece as well as the stanzas within it. So I had to ask myself a few questions that had to do with the form of my piece. So the first question was, how many lines per stanza should I use? At first I didn't really have a concept of how many to do, and I just kind of wrote my poem freely and didn't really focus on it much. And after looking at it again, I realized that I should kind of have some uniformity to it, and it would help make the piece better overall to appeal to the senses a lot more. And so I ended up alternating between 4 and 5 verses. And then I chose to focus on how short each line would be, because to me it really kind of cut in short in some places and extended longer in others, which made it harder to read and didn't really direct the reader throughout. And so all of these really helped me with auditory appeal, emphasis on certain parts, and even visual appeal of the piece. So overall to me it's important because it's the framework of the piece, and without the framework you can't focus on any other parts of it. So the next part I looked at was the clarity of my piece. Often in my piece I was left with narrative questions that kind of confused some of the readers with my poetry. To define clarity, I looked up a definition on Poetry Foundation. So it said, the definition of ambiguity itself, somewhat elusive. Clarity is murky and ambiguity is clear, but clarity virtues are so taken for granted that the question of how those virtues might be demonstrable seems like it ought to be within reach. So to me, this really demonstrated that somewhat clarity is two on itself, and you don't want to make something as clear as you can by straight out saying it, but it should be clear enough that there aren't too many questions left at the end that leaves the reader asking important questions about your piece. In our handout by Bad Poetry, I actually found 2 more quotes. The first quote is, how well focused it is, how clear, simple, and moving. So you want to keep your piece moving throughout while staying clear, but also don't tell too much or else the piece won't be able to move because the reader won't be interested, which is kind of somewhat with the next quote. The more you confuse the reader, the less likely they'll be to remain interested in what you are trying to relate to. So if you want them to relate to your piece, you really have to keep clarity within it so they can understand what you're talking about as well as want to read the rest of your poem and not stop halfway through. So I had to eliminate the narrative questions like I spoke on again. This really helped me add more description and imagery within my piece as well as clarify a lot of pieces that confuse people. For this, I personified the doll a lot more within my piece so people understood actually what was happening in my piece. So I had to focus on portraying the story even more so by explaining what was happening to the doll and me, as well as explaining the doll itself and how I felt within it. So this is my piece afterwards. The form changes I made are highlighted in pink, and some of the clarity is highlighted in yellow. As you can see, I highlighted where a lot of it has to do with even just describing the looks the doll would give me and it falling out of a tree, and it kind of gives it a more childish feel. So the second time my revised version goes, when I was a child, I believed that my toys were alive, each having a distinct face. I remember the doll, its devilish smile, and piercing eyes gazing deep within me, waiting for me to be ill-prepared. Her dark eyes watched as I walked across the room. She consoled my fears of loneliness, but instilled others, heights. I remember the sun pulling me into a trance. I remember the sun burn, stabbing with every movement, dry and cracking like a branch. She spoke to me through silent gestures as she fell from the branch. I reached for her hand. I dropped from the tree, snap. I fell through the air. No warnings preceded, not even a glance. My skin tingled with fear as the grass grew nearer. That's when I remembered, children do not fly. So overall you can see that it's a lot more clear what's happening within the story, and you can even see the images a lot clearer just by adding a little bit more about the doll and about myself to the piece.
I chose 2 poems to sort of emulate my own poem. One was Stephanie Gray's Stuff I Probably Did and Didn't, which is actually my motto for this poem. And also Angel Villanueva's Bridge of Tears. I chose these 2 poems because they're both narrative poems and that's more of my style of writing. And they are also in column structure, which is also a way I like to write. They're particular with annotated line that adds extra meaning and overall emotion to the poem.
The poem I chose was actually in our book, Imaginative Writing. It's a story about the body by Robert Haas. I really like this poem when we read it in class. It's a form of a prose poem, and I think overall it really emphasizes the importance of story as well as sound throughout the piece. And I really like this because it helps show the character through its voices and actions as well as imagery, and that kind of made me want to emulate this throughout my piece to show more about the doll as well as myself and what I was seeing in the situation. And these are our sources.